So today Zeb cleaned the garage, and while Zeb cleaned the garage, I painted all the things I've been collecting that I haven't gotten to. And I thought it would be the perfect opportunity for me to do a video all about distressing, because it's the #1 question I get asked. So hopefully I've got enough different pieces here that I can give you some good information and it'll help you on your next distressing project. First things first, these black chairs gotta go. I'm not gonna sand in the garage and have sanding dust all over them. It's hard enough to keep them dust free as it is. So the black's gonna go, and then I'm gonna start sanding. I'm gonna go white, yellow, and then blue. I'm even gonna do a little bit of wet distress. All my furniture is painted with DIY paint. First, I'm gonna distress the white furniture. It's painted with DIY White Swan. Even though it's all natural and non-toxic, I'm gonna wear a mask because you don't wanna be breathing in that dust. It can really make you sick. So I'm using this sander because it is a really good sander. If your sander is too old, you can get squiggles in your piece and you really don't want that. Another thing to keep in mind is fine sandpaper. I'm using 220 sandpaper, which is usually the perfect sandpaper to get a good distress and no squiggles. So a lot of times you see distressed furniture and it looks kind of like a cheetah, like there's splotches all over it, totally unorganic and not natural. So my trick is that I like to distress all along the edges where it would naturally wear, and then I do sand over the flat surface so I get a little wear in some of those spots, but I don't want it to look like it's got polka dot distressing all over it. So you can see that I've got a little bit of a swirly here where you can see that my orbital only got so far into the corner. So I took my sandpaper off and I'm gonna stretch that distress into the corner so that way it's not obvious that that's where my orbital stopped. So this piece, when I distressed across the flat surfaces, I didn't stop and do any cheetah, but you can see there's a really good overall look. It kind of looks a little bit like barnwood, and that's because when I bought this, I picked it specifically because it looked handmade. It was made with actual wood, it wasn't mass produced, so you have the variation and texture in the actual wood. It's going to give you a little bit more of a barnwood finish as opposed to a really smooth factory finish. And that's something to keep in mind when you're buying your furniture. If you want it to look like this, then you want pieces that are actually made with wood grain. So when you sand it, you can see that. I get asked all the time about this. I paint projects with the drawers in, unless the drawer has a lip, for a myriad of reasons. One, because I like to get just a little edge painted without going too far and making it stick. 2, because a lot of times it's windy, drawers blow over. And 3, because when you're spraying especially, it's super fast. But I like to pull all my drawers out and then I sand around all the edges just so that way they're nice and clean when my customer gets them. So I'm running my sander over the whole top of this piece, even though I'm not getting like big chunks of distress. It's just lightly taking it off anywhere that it's raised. Also, there's some imperfection. I'll sand around that just to bring those out and add some character. It also smooths out my paint so that way anywhere where it might have been a little bit of texture from the spray gun, it's nice and smooth. So I do switch my paper out from time to time when it starts to get worn out, but I don't usually switch my paper out in between lighter colors. It's only when I get to the darker colors that I make sure that there's no light dust on it, otherwise it'll ruin your piece. And vice versa. If you've been sanding something black, you definitely don't want to go from something black to something white, or else you're going to get that black pigment all in your lighter color paint. This was not a vintage piece. This was a little bit more modern. So I'm gonna not push as hard and go lightly just to see how much it's gonna come off and make sure that it's not peeling, because this was really shiny before I painted it. I think I'll be fine. So it's always good to go slow and see how much the 220 is gonna take off, especially when you're working on a more modern piece that had a really slick finish to start with. So you can see a little bit of black coming through this top, but it's not like splotchy. And then I got all the way around the edge. And then I did a few pieces to kind of make it look chippy on the bottom, and then around this bottom edge, and then we're good to go. Let's talk about wet distress. There's a few different reasons I use it. One, I use it on porcelain or pieces that I don't want my sander to ruin. I also use it on hardware because the sander will make the hardware like super shiny, so I'll wet distress paint off of that. I also use it if for whatever reason I'm starting to get streaky distress. I'll take my wet distress and go the opposite direction, and then that way it makes it look a little bit more natural and organic. So sometimes if I want to make something look more chippy and not necessarily distressed, then I take my wet rag, it's just water, I go the opposite direction, and that just kind of makes it look more like a chip and less like a streak. Alright guys, I'm going to get the rest of this distressed, including the black chairs. I'm going to make sure that I have them away from the white furniture because I also don't want that black dust on my light furniture. Zeb's gonna go ahead and put in a bunch of pictures so you can see all the distress up close. If you're interested in any of the colors that I used on the pieces I distressed today, go to jamirayvintage.com for all the colors used. I used White Swan, Little Black Dress, Apothecary, and Cake Batter. If you have any specific questions on distressing, be sure to comment below and we'll answer them and get right back to you. Share this video with any of your friends who love DIY or painting furniture. Be sure to hit the notifications button so you don't miss Zeb and I, especially when we go live on Saturday nights. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Jami Ray Vintage for more DIY.